3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11.
Welcome to Roots of Reality Experiences. I'm Ben Baumann. I'm joined today by Ben Radford, who is the deputy editor of Skeptical Inquirer magazine, a fellow at the Committee of Skeptical Inquiry, a science-based paranormal investigator, folklorist, co-host of the podcast Squaring the Strange, writer of several books and countless articles, as well as being on television several times, on like BBC, Discovery Channel, National Geographic. So Ben, thank you for being here.
Not at all. Thanks for having me on, Ben. I don't get to chat to Ben's very often, so it's
that's right. It's a little weird, yeah. Ben and Ben, here we go. Yeah. So getting into your time as an investigator, that seems like kind of a niche field to be in, especially from a science-based way. You hear about sort of the ghost hunters on television, but not so much people actually trying to be serious about it with science. So tell me a little bit how you got involved in this.
Yeah, it is sort of a niche thing. Even some of my long-term friends, they know what I do because I've been doing it for a long time, but they're not entirely sure what it is that I do. So
I could see that. Yeah.
Yeah. Basically, I have a couple hats. One is I am, as you mentioned, I'm deputy editor for Skeptical Inquirer Science magazine. I've been doing that for almost 20 years now. And it's basically a magazine that explores all sorts of phenomena ranging from creationism to alternative medicine to basically anything that the reality of it is up to debate. And then I also bring folklore to it. So I'm a member of the American Folklore Society, and I've researched and spoken on various folklore aspects. So rumors, conspiracy theories, urban legends,
right.
Things like that. And in terms of how I got into it, basically, I think really my initial introduction into the whole investigation field was as a kid, because I, like many teenagers, was fascinated by the unexplained,
Sure,
the mysterious, right? Who doesn't love that, right? And so,
yeah, definitely.
So, I think that when I was a kid, I was a voracious reader, and so I would oftentimes I'd gather up my allowance money, $5 or $10 for cleaning out the cat box, whatever it is. And I would go to a local used bookstore and I'd buy a whole bunch of books. So I would come home on a summer afternoon with, a bunch of books underneath my arm, and I'd be reading. And I'd get books on, the Bermuda Triangle and psychics and, Bigfoot and Loch Ness Monster and this and that. And of course I was fascinated by them because they're interesting, right? They're inherently fascinating topics. But as time went on, I got sort of disillusioned because I realized that most of the books I was buying, there was little or no actual investigation.
Right.
It was sort of like, here's another story, and it is said that, and
that's right. Yeah.
You know how it goes.
Yeah.
So basically I'm reading these books, which I'm finding so fascinating, but I'm like, well, hold on here. It's like, you want me to believe that planes are disappearing in the Bermuda Triangle and that the Loch Ness Monster is, attacking people. And I'm like, well, which planes? When was the last monster seen, right? If you're going to tell me, if I'm going to be reading some spine tingling story of some horrific thing seen in a London dungeon that snatched a kid off the street, what was the kid's name? What was the date? Where did it happen?
Yep.
And so basically that's sort of what got me into it was I was reading these topics which genuinely interested me. but I was seeing little or no actual investigation. I said, well, hold on here. These are interesting things, right? If Bigfoot is real, that's cool. We need to know about that. We need to know,
I mean, that's exactly.
You know, where does it fit in the family tree, right? In the tree of life. If psychics are real and they can predict the future, this is really important. All right, we could. You know, we could know there's a pandemic coming. We could solve. I mean, there's so many real world applications, and so that's sort of what got me into it was wanting to take these topics seriously and actually do some investigation on my own.
Yeah, all those important details that a lot of people just like to gloss over, and but you want to actually get serious about it and find out, okay, well, if this is true, you know, this is a game changer for society. You know, why is this not being, you know, used constantly to make decisions and to learn about things? You know, psychics predicting world events. You know, come on, it's that's huge.
Yeah, I mean, and this is, you know, this is one of the common misperceptions, you know, when people know that I'm a skeptic, or I'm ambivalent about the name skeptic, honestly. It doesn't bother me, but it doesn't really hold much traction in the public. They don't really know.
It's like, what exactly does that mean?
What exactly is that? So a lot of times people will sort of assume that means I'm a doubter or I'm trying to disprove or debunk things. And I don't see it that way. I see it more as I'm genuinely interested in solving these mysteries, and I'm trying to bring science and critical thinking to it. And if there really is something there, great, that's wonderful. I want to be there. But if there's not something there, if instead the basis for these things, and things ranging from alien visitation to crop circles, Bigfoot, psychic powers, ghosts, what have you, if these things are actually, if what people are reporting are not in fact these things, then it's an interesting question, because then the question becomes, what are people interpreting as ghosts? What are people thinking are Bigfoot? What external things are people mistaking for these things? Maybe they're hoaxes, misidentifications, what have you. And so to my mind, it's a fascinating topic either way.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned like the term skeptic, because I guess, you know, when you're talking to people who are true believers in some type of superstition, you know, being skeptic is almost like a political term, you know, where there's believers and skeptics, and these labels can kind of divide people and make it, you know, seem like you're not open to the possibility of there being something, when you're just trying to be objective about the research and, you know, find out what's most likely to be true in this situation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember about 12, 15 years ago, I was invited to Pocatello, Idaho for a Bigfoot conference. And I was the token skeptic, as I often am on TV and elsewhere. And I was in this big convention hall or something, and there were probably, I don't know, 200 people there, mostly old white guys, because that's who looks for Bigfoot for the most part. And I was on stage, and again, I was the sort of, you know, the best known skeptic of the lot. And I said, look, I'm addressing the crowd here. I said, you know, I'm not the enemy here. I said, I'm here to tell you why, in my research and my investigations, I am skeptical that Bigfoot exists. But I will take you seriously, right? If you tell me you saw a Bigfoot, I'm not going to laugh at you. I'm not going to, you know, snicker behind your back. I'm not going to tell people you're crazy. I will listen to you. I will look at your evidence. I will look at your photographs, whatever it is. I'll say, look, you know, out there, pointing to, you know, the streets of Boston or Texas. I said, you know, they're not going to take you seriously. They think you're crazy or stupid for being a Bigfoot believer. And because of my background in psychology and because of the investigations that I do, I'm not going to take that approach. I will listen to you. I will take you seriously. So my point to them, and I've made this point to ghost hunters as well, and psychics, I said, look, I'm not the enemy here. I'm trying to help you do better quality research, validate these things. And so you can bitch and moan all you want about how, well, you know, the scientists won't believe us and the skeptics are dismissing it. Maybe the problem is that your evidence, the quality of your evidence, is so low. So don't blame the scientists and the skeptics for not listening to you if you're just giving them crap evidence. And so that's what I've been trying to do for most of my professional career, is try and is, you know, bring, you know, look at these topics respectfully and diplomatically, but also say, look, guys, you're interested in things, I'm interested in these things. Let's figure out, why is it that the quality of your research is not up to the threshold that scientists are going to take you seriously?
Right. I mean, that's such a huge factor, and I think that especially this approach of not making it a demeaning process towards someone who truly believes something, because at the end of the day, there's so many beliefs out there, and so many of them are based off of blind faith, basically, of something.
Right.
And you look at just all the different types of religious beliefs out there, and these are considered normal, while belief in Bigfoot or psychics or more spiritual based things might not be considered normal in those circles, but are normal in others. And society might look at religion, because it's more popular, as being, oh, that's an okay belief, but a superstition like believing psychics or ghosts might not fly as well as
Right.
normal. But in reality, they're all of them they're not based on the evidence we have. It's based on what you want to believe, and for whatever reason, people, I guess, sort of divide themselves in those categories. But
yeah, and part of it is that the evidence for these things, and again, you can apply this to ghosts, you can apply this to Bigfoot, you can apply this to psychic powers, take your pick.
Yeah.
The evidence for these things is inherently ambiguous, right? Because
Yeah.
if there was clear evidence of these things, then we would all agree. We'd be like,
Yeah.
of course Bigfoot exists. We can go to the zoo, and there they are, and this is what they look like, and this is what they eat, and what else. Or of course ghosts exist. You can go to the Natural History Museum and see a ghost. They're in this jar, and you can wave at them, and these are the qualities, right? And so we don't have that, and so because of that, the problem that many of the proponents and believers have is that the evidence is inherently ambiguous. It's experiences, it's anecdotes, it's fuzzy photographs, it's a feeling, it's personal, it's all these sorts of things, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean,
Right.
It's not invalid, and I've never said it's invalid. But the question is, instead, is there something that scientists and skeptics and researchers can build on, or is it all just this mountain of somebody said they saw something, and here's a blurry photograph, and could this be X?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's super important too, because anyone listening who and many do, I think probably most people have some type of belief in something that they can't scientifically prove necessarily 100%, and that's just a part of life. And as long as you're not hurting someone, it's not a big deal. It's just when we're making decisions about how to live our lives, it's best to make them based off the best evidence available, and using the scientific method when it comes to different beliefs is really critical to that. And I think what you do, obviously, suggests just shows how important that is. I know you've mentioned that in some of your investigations, you've come across situations where people's lives were kind of eaten up by a belief in something. Do you remember, by the way, your first investigation?
Oh, that's a good question. Actually, I do. And it actually dates back to when I was a teenager. I was talking to you earlier about I would buy these books on what would be considered new age or paranormal or mysterious, whatever else. And I was maybe 14, 15, 16 or something, and I bought a used book on runes. On Viking runes and Celtic.
Sure.
Runes. Okay. And it was these is what these runes mean. And there was a section on casting runes, and it's like, you can tell the future, and you can tell what you should do by casting runes. And so I'm like, okay. I mean, of course, in retrospect, it's the same as tarot readers or tea leaves or palmistry. I mean, it's part of a much broader tradition. But at the time, I was, and so I remember very clearly. So I would. I read the book, and I copied. I got little shards of clay, because a friend of mine made pottery, and so he always had clay laying around. So I grabbed some little scraps of clay about the size of a quarter, And I think I had maybe 20 or 30 or something. And on each one, I very carefully, wrote down, this is what the rune, and I wrote the little symbol on there, and it was all very, and I probably, did some incantation or something, and I probably did a Tom Sawyer thing where I drop of blood or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, oh, okay. So I followed the instructions, and these are the runes, and I can decide what to do. And so I would like cast the runes in front of me. This is my backyard at 4:00 on a Saturday or something. And I would toss these things. So I would ask the world a question, and at one point I had a crush on a girl named Julie Wolfe at the time. This is
okay.
And Julie's, I think she's since married a police officer. I haven't seen her in 30 years. Anyway, so I was like, okay, should I ask Julie out, right? Because like, oh my God, she's so she's smart. So like I do this, and I'm trying to interpret these things, and I'm like, okay, what does this mean? This rune came face up, this rune came face down, and I'm looking at these things, and I realize, well, hold on here. What if I'm reading it wrong? What if the person who wrote this book got it wrong? Right? What if?
Okay. Yeah.
How do they know? Right? I mean, they wrote the book, but I mean, how do I know that the author got it right? I mean, it could be that this rune that means this actually means something else. So I started questioning the author's authority on these things, and then I said, well, hold on. I mean, what if I made a real important? I mean, I didn't end up asking Julie out, but what if I had made an important decision based on that? Right? And so
yeah, sure.
So the parallel that I would bring would be, for example, astrology, which I personally don't believe in, but many people do.
Right.
And as you know, with sun signs, people, they say, and there's all sorts of different versions of astrology, many of which are contradictory. But some of them would say, well, Geminis don't get along well with Tauruses, or Sagittarius, whatever else.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so I'm thinking for a second that I realized early on that there are and can be real world consequences to these beliefs. And it doesn't matter, I mean, whether I ask a girl out or not or whatever else, but what if somebody makes a decision about whether to take a new job, or to move to a new city, or to date somebody, or to break up with somebody, or to do a cancer cure, or whatever the hell it is? I realized, well, you're if you don't investigate, if you don't establish the veracity, the underlying fundamental truth, at least to some extent, then you're basically just leaving it up to chance. And so I think that was one of the first times that there was this sort of inkling of skepticism that maybe it either was or could be harmful to put your faith in something that you read in the second handbook and follow the advice of the runes or the cards or whatever else.
Yeah, so that's fascinating to me, because you did an investigation, but you were investigating it really out of, first, it seemed like an interest and belief to see if it worked. Yeah. And then you came to the conclusion later that, hey, this isn't making any sense. And
yeah, I mean, not only was it, I mean, again, who knows? I mean, at the end of the day, I shouldn't decide whether I go to grad school or whether I move based on how cards turned up. I mean, if people want to do that, that's fine. Just for me personally.
Yeah. If you're trying to be spontaneous, I guess, then you can do that.
Okay. Then knock yourself out. Yeah.
Yeah. But otherwise, probably not a good idea to just, especially decisions that you can weigh the good versus the bad. It's not a toss-up decision, Exactly. Please, make the decision that you feel is best, not based on a coin flip, basically. So
yeah, and keep in mind that, I mean, in my field, I make a distinction between beliefs that are essentially harmless and beliefs that are potentially harmful, right? So for example, if someone tells me that they believe we didn't go to the moon, I don't care. I mean, it's not if you think the earth is flat, or you believe that Bigfoot are out there, that's fine. It's not going to have any particular effect on your daily decisions and life choices. Yeah. However, if you believe that, if for example, let's say, God forbid, that a family member goes missing, or a loved one is gone, and a psychic comes to your door and offers you advice and say, well, I'm getting these feelings, and I'm getting, she's okay, but she's near water and she needs help. In these cases, and I've researched psychic detectives quite a bit, there are very real consequences to following on sketchy advice.
Well, I mean, it's just a great way to be preyed on, really, by people that can make quite a bit of money off of it, and toying with your emotions. And there seems to be also a long history of psychics doing that. For the beginning, when psychics became really popular in the U.S. even. So it's
yeah, I mean, and I should add that, I mean, most of the psychics that I've investigated are sincere. There's a handful of frauds and con, but for the most part, in my experience, most people who claim to have psychic abilities genuinely believe it. And I mean, I could talk for an hour on that, and there's all sorts of really fast.
But I mean, I guess that's comforting in a way that they're not doing it because to purposely harm someone. They're doing it because they think they can help. It's just, and that's also another interesting thing at play, because it just shows that a belief in the superstition isn't necessarily from just the outsider, but the person who's even promoting the superstition themselves believes in it and their abilities, which is another fascinating thing about that.
Yeah, I mean, and there's other cases. I mean, I'll give you one quick example. In terms of the harm that the beliefs and superstitions can have, is I get contacted maybe every year or two by people who believe they've been cursed, and and it's it's hard for me to deal with, right? Because I mean, I have a background in psychology, and I understand the psychology of curses, and I can talk about that. But in these cases, there are people that are sincerely frightened, right? They're not, and I can tell. Sometimes I speak to them, sometimes I can, and they're not putting me on, they're not trolling me. They're genuinely frightened, and they're sincere. They genuinely believe that an enemy, an ex, some coworker, whoever, has placed a curse on them. And they're frightened. They lose sleep. They lose marriages. They lose their jobs because they're so embedded in their belief that anything bad that happens to them is seen through the prism of being a curse. And one of the ways that I try and help people, I say, look, I understand you believe you've been cursed, and I'll try and sort of tease out why they think that and try to understand the tendrils and the levers there. But I'll say, look, bad things happen to everybody. Literally everybody in the world has some bad thing happen to you. It could have been something bad. It could have been, a car accident. It could be you stubbed your toe. I mean, there's any number of things. And I said, understand that whether curses exist or not, and for the record, there's not good evidence that they do, but whether they exist or not, I try to get them to view their situation through a psychological perspective. I'll say, look, I'll say, you may be right that you're a curse. I don't think you are, but you might be right. I'm not in your shoes. However, even if you're right, what's probably happening is that you're interpreting ordinary bad things that happen to you, as they happen to everybody, as being part of the curse. And so if you begin to understand that you can start parsing out what the problem is.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and a lot to unpack there with that. When it comes to curses, so you're being contacted, but are they aware when they contact you that you're sort of a science-based investigator, and they look for specifically a science-based sort of curse investigator, or is it just someone they stumbled across you, or how do they reach out to you? Because I guess that it's interesting.
How do I get on the curse mailing list, you're asking?
Yeah, it's I don't. Yeah, how do they come to you? Because it seems like you would have a background where if someone's really deep into a curse, they would think that, oh well, he's a skeptic, he won't be able to help me. I'm gonna go to this person who's an expert on getting rid of curses instead.
Right. And that's, of course, that's part of the problem, is that once you accept the assumptions underlying curses, then that's when you start going to psychics and oftentimes paying psychics to remove the curse. And in oftentimes, a curse, the idea of a curse is created by an unethical psychic. And I've seen this is well demonstrated, where not all the time, but far too often, a psychic will find a mark. They'll say, wow, she's got some money, he's got some money, this person is emotionally vulnerable. And they'll say, oh, no, you seem to be okay. And oftentimes it'll begin just as a palm reading or something simple. It's just nothing too heavy, just sort of a light thing. And then they're saying, by the way, have bad things started happening recently? And it's like, oh yeah, this now, like, well, I don't want to scare you, but I'm getting a sense of energies around you and bad. And you should come back next week. Come back. We need to talk some more. I need to try and work through this. And they build up this belief in curses. And oftentimes, of course, the answer, they can solve the curse. Don't worry about that.
Of course, yeah.
Right.
Don't
so,
worry.
Fortunately, I have the power to solve your curse. It'll be expensive, but you can, bring money, and there's a bunch of techniques that they can do. So, but this is part of the problem. And so as an investigator and as a skeptic, I try and sort of work around that to try and get people to recognize the situation they're in and the different factors involved. And so again, oftentimes, look, when somebody comes to me believing they're cursed, by definition, they believe in curses, right? People who don't believe in curses don't come to you. Right. Yeah. Skeptics don't get possessed by demons. They don't have ghosts haunting their houses. Right. So you have to go to where the person is. And that's what I try to do. Again, drawing on my background in psychology and having done this for 20 some years. And so I try and bring these things to bear and try to help themselves out of it. And so anyway, to get back to your original question, there's a couple different ways. One is that I used to write for Discovery News and LiveScience.com. It's been many years, but in the process of that, I wrote dozens or hundreds of articles, including some on curses and possession and things like that. And so what happens, and I know this because they tell me, they say, I'm kind of desperate. I'm not sure what to do. I saw your article that you wrote on curses. Can you help me? Now, I think I don't remember the date of 2008, 2012. I mean, this was years ago, but I'm still out there. People can track me down. And so that's one way. And so even though if you read the article that I wrote, it's fairly balanced, it's fairly, I mean, and I'm writing for, Discovery News. I mean, I'm not gonna, so I mean, I'm very upfront about where I am. I say, look, I'm trying to help you out, but this is where I'm coming from. And I actually have a recent book out titled Big If True, Adventures in Oddity. And it came out, not to plug my book, but it came out.
No, that's good. No, I'm sure people will be interested. So
yeah, in fact, I ironically just happen to have one here.
Just in time.
Yeah, ka-ching. And the reason I mention it is the very first, it's basically a collection of my investigations for Skeptical Inquirer magazine and the different columns I've written. I think there's 70 or something. And the reason I bring it up is that the very first one is a pretty in-depth analysis of a woman named Chelsea who's contacted me wanting me to help her remove a curse. So again, it's one of those things where, and to be fair, I mean, that's one version of it. So in addition, I also get, because I've written about ghosts, the same thing happens, right? Where I will get somebody who emails me out of the blue, again, some random stranger who says, my house is haunted. And, can you look at this video? Can you look at this thing? In some cases, again, they're sort of similar to curses in that they believe that there's something sincere and malevolent going on in their house. And so once again, it puts me in a difficult position because I'm not a psychologist. I have a full-time job. I'm a writer. Podcast. I can't stop what I'm doing to help this person through whatever they're doing. At the same time, I feel ethically obligated to help them out as much as I can. And so that's what I try to do.
I mean, I guess the good news is also that, since these people would be coming to you, they have at least a little bit of openness to the possibility that, maybe it's not what they think what they fear, I suppose.
Yeah.
It could be, and that's good, and that you're available for that. That's obviously huge for them, so they don't drift off to someone who might try to take advantage of that.
Yeah, and honestly, a lot of times, some of the ghost hunting ones are especially difficult because, oftentimes when someone comes to me believing they've been cursed or they believe in their house is haunted or whatever else, one of the first questions I ask is, why do you think that? And it's not in a challenging, dismissive way. It's like, I sincerely don't know why. I don't know if you are.
Right.
I'm not on your. Tell me what is going on in your life that makes you think, rightly or wrongly, that you're cursed or that there's some entity in your house or whatever else that's out to get you. And I can sort of work from that because that grounds it in a phenomenological explanation. It grounds it in a personal experience situation.
Yeah.
Where I can say, okay, well, you may be right, but are there alternative explanations? Is it possible that what you're interpreting as the product of a curse is ordinary bad luck that happens to anybody? Is it possible that you're interpreting some a fire in the garage, or I mean whatever it is it possible that it's something else? And so that's what I try to do. And my point here is that when I ask people, why do you believe that? Oftentimes, in the case of people who believe their house is haunted, particularly by evil spirits, it's because of TV shows.
Yeah. Okay.
And they will point, and I'll ask them point blank, and they'll say, "Well, on Ghost Hunters or Ghost."
Oh my gosh! Yeah. Yeah.
And that's actually one of the things that really pisses me off is that oftentimes I and other skeptics have to clean up the mess, the emotional mess, the psychological mess made by these TV ghost hunters. And they're out there, getting their ratings, and they're doing that. They're signing autographs. They got this whole thing. And what they don't realize is that many of their audience members, a lot of them recognize it's garbage, but some of them don't. And some of them take their cues from television and they incorporate that. Say, well, I saw, an episode, a couple weeks ago on this, and it's sort of similar to what's going on here. And they transfer that. And so it's up to me to come in there and try and calm their fears and say, look, number one, these shows, I've been on ghost hunting shows.
Yeah.
Sit down, honey. These are not, half of it's faked, it's scripted. I mean, there's the whole thing. And I said, but again, this gets to the harm where, a lot of these ghost hunters, they don't care. They're making their money. They're these reality TV stars. They do their thing. And I think a lot of times they don't genuinely recognize the harm that they can do. And they would say, well, it's entertainment and we don't really, it's ambiguous. That's all well and good. But in the real world, there are people that have been harmed by this. And I know that because I've seen it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I think you definitely hit a spot where I've found myself thinking exactly the same thing constantly, especially watching things like, seeing the History Channel, for example. As a historian,
I'm sure your take on the History Channel is really interesting.
I'm quite disturbed by it. And to me, the way they present it, and I can imagine, for someone who doesn't really know much about, history, but's really interested in the subject, kind of a fan, and they turn on the History Channel expecting to get, history, of course, and it's like, alien DNA, and pyramids that were built by the ancient aliens. And I'm just thinking, it's like, it's the people producing this know that there are going to be people out there that really believe in this.
Yeah.
And they still produce it because at the end of the day, it's profitable. And people like seeing things that are also sort of countering traditional narratives and things you won't learn in school. And that's fascinating to people.
Right. The forbidden knowledge story.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've talked to producers. I mean, again, I've done lots of TV, and after you're done shooting, I'll sit there and chat with the producers. And honestly, I've had a couple of them tell me they're actually surprised and a bit dismayed that people believe this. They're like we know this is garbage. They know it's garbage, right? They meaning the cast members. It's like this whole. It's like kayfabe with pro wrestling. It's like. Yeah. Everybody in the inside knows, for the most part, that this is all bullshit. But then there's like, well, we can't say that because, and it's like, it's like, yeah. But yeah, I've had conversations with producers who are just like, yeah, we have to put it on with a straight face, but it's like, really, people?
So, I mean, that also kind of raises another question in my mind, because have these sort of skeptical societies ever considered like trying to, talk with government officials about regulating, what type of pseudoscience or pseudo history can be promoted on television on a regular basis, that can lead people to, really live in alternate realities to a certain extent.
Well, ideally, yes, but of course, in practice, you're going to run against the First Amendment. I mean, the
Right,
fact is
right. Well,
that with a few very small caveats, you can say
mhm,
whatever you want. If you say something
yeah,
that's defamatory
yeah,
and is potentially libelous, and it is made either with knowing that it's wrong or with reckless disregard,
yeah,
and it harms somebody, the reputation, you can sue them in civil court and you can
yeah,
win.
yeah.
But other than that, I mean, other than there's no.
You can't really
if
regulate, yeah, exactly how that is. I mean, and even putting a disclaimer would cause legal loopholes, because then they would just argue like, well, how can you say what's true or what's not?
right,
It's a matter of opinion. I can believe what I want,
right.
and so then it really just becomes an information battle of who can convince the public more about what's most likely to be true, and that's more of an education problem, I suppose, and regulate schools about what they teach, perhaps.
It is,
Um,
and that's one reason why my focus is often on critical thinking. And so
yeah,
what I try to do with my investigations, my books, my research, is to not only show people how you go about solving a mystery, investigating a mystery, but also to get them thinking for themselves. It's like, just if you want to know what the truth is about the Chupacabra or whatever else, read the
yeah.
articles, read the books, it's all there. But my ultimate goal is to get people to think for themselves. And so say, okay, well, in this case, this was what really happened, and apply that to this other thing. So,
Hmm.
it's the old thing of, giving a man a fish or teaching man to fish. And so that's one reason why what I try to do, not always successfully, but I try to get people to question and to sort of question assumptions and try to give a blueprint or template
Right.
for critical thinking. And I'm not the smartest guy, in the room. I've been doing this for a long time, and I have some background in it. And oftentimes, the building blocks are fairly simple. Critical thinking is difficult because it's counterintuitive oftentimes.
Right.
Um,
It's harder usually. That's the big problem.
yeah, it's harder,
Yeah.
yeah. But the basic building blocks, I mean, there's a half dozen. I mean, it's
Yeah.
it's
Yep.
it's not rocket science, but it does take study.
Yeah. And have you guys considered ever getting involved with sort of education initiatives for schools and trying to promote certain curriculum in different schools?
Yeah. So yeah, at the Center for Inquiry, there's a couple different branches. One of them, there's what's called a TIES program, TIES, and that's a program which is the goal is to help science teachers deal with creationist
Right.
beliefs. And so, try and get people to understand the importance of evolution, why evolution is thoroughly proven across all
Right. Right.
sciences and so on. But I mean, it's sort of mortifying that there would even be a need in 2020, 2021,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
but there it is,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
In terms of, of my stuff, I mean, we do have a couple of programs that sort of, offer templates to teachers. I've been fortunate enough to have a couple of my books used in critical thinking courses in a couple of universities. So that's sort of what I try and get
Hmm.
out of it. I mean, and there are, I can think of a half dozen or so professors that deal with critical thinking. And oftentimes they do use not just my books, but Skeptical Inquirer magazine or works by
Yeah.
Massimo Polidoro or James Randi or Joe Nicola or whoever else to try and bring that to the students. And part of it is because if you go into a classroom and you say, who wants to learn about science? You're like,
Hmm.
but if you
Yeah.
say, who wants to talk about Bigfoot? They're like, hold on, what? Bigfoot? Like, yes, we can examine the reality of Bigfoot through science. We can, all these topics, you know, there's this common misperception that the unexplained or the paranormal are somehow beyond the realm of science, whatever the hell that would be. They're not. They're amenable to the exactly the same processes, right? So if Bigfoot are real, and the Loch Ness Monster is real, these sorts of things, then there has to be a breeding population. There has to be bodies. There has to be hair samples, bones, lots of things that by logic and necessity would need to exist. And the same thing is also true, just by the way, for ghosts. You know, for example, you know, I did a book on ghosts, and in researching that, I found lots of different parallel and sometimes contradictory theories about what ghosts are. And one of the most common beliefs among the proponents, the ghost experts, take that as you will, is that the reason that ghosts have yet to be proven by science, the reason that we don't yet know, is because somehow our instruments can't detect them.
Right.
They're not there.
Yeah.
And I say, hold on here. Back up a second.
A lot of people,
yeah. Let me just parse that out for you for a second, because ghosts presumably can be photographed. There are photographs allegedly of ghosts. There are videotapes of ghosts. There's film of ghosts. People are so if those genuinely are ghosts, then by definition, that means that they appear in the visible spectrum. That's what that means.
Right.
If they appear in the visible spectrum, they are by definition being detected by cameras, by eyes, by things like that. And so you need to pick one or the other. You can't say, well, you know, the technology hasn't gotten good enough to detect ghosts. Then what are all these ghost photos? Are those not ghost photos? Well, I didn't say that. Well, what the hell are you saying? Well, look at the time.
Yeah, that's right. That's pivot. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that is a really funny thing. But I mean, and when you're talking about evolution in schools, I suppose that is one of the things that I guess the government and legal system have gotten involved with a little bit historically. The battle over whether creationism can be, you know, taught next to it, and it's fascinating, all the things at play, and how these things continue to be problems, you know, just throughout history and today, and just I don't think there's any sign of stopping. So
yeah, and you know, a lot of it's just education. I mean, you know, you talk to people like, you know, people say, oh, you know, they're not allowed to teach religion in school. Of course they are. I learned religion in school. They're just not allowed to teach it in the science class. Right. Well, you know, they're outlawing prayer in school. No, you can pray in school all you want. It just can't be directed by the teacher. Don't confuse the two. They're not the same thing. Yeah. But they have all these BS talking points that, you know, come on.
Well, I mean, and I guess one of the things is, you know, I'm originally from Kansas, so I grew up really in the heart of the Bible Belt, and you know, and so that subject's been especially interesting for me because, you know, I've known, you know, many people and come across many people that, you know, are very religious, and you know, and one of the things that was always fascinating is that evolution was such a problem for them because they, you know, couldn't interpret it in the Bible, for example. But to me, I was just thinking, it's like, you know, if you're a true believer in God, you know, wouldn't something like evolution, this amazing process, wouldn't that amplify your thinking of God and how powerful and miraculous? Like, it doesn't seem like something that could hurt this, you know, the basis of your religion.
Exactly. I mean, you know, if God is threatened by the idea of evolution, then God is not exactly omnipotent. You know, I mean, you know, one example, a famous example is Francis Collins. I think of the NIH, and he is a well-known, one of the world's top scientists and a Christian. Yeah. And he has no problem at all acknowledging that evolution is a proven. Right. There's no contradiction there. You know, you can believe in God and different forms of gods, or of course many different gods. Yeah. And also believe that evolution is true. And so that there's no necessary contradiction there. But if, for example, if, for example, you're a young Earth creationist, or
Yeah.
for example, if if you're somebody whose theology is based on the assumption that the Bible is a true historical record, including the flood, and of course the Great Flood has predecessors in Gilgamesh. I mean,
there's lots of great floods in history,
and you know that better than I do, right?
Yeah. It's a popular concept to have. So
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, and it's also interesting because, like, in my research on sort of astronomy in colonial America, for example, it was very popular for early astronomers in the US to really look at observing the universe as a way of coming to understand God versus using the Bible. Really, they'd look at the universe first and then come to the Bible and see how it connects with their observation.
Right.
So they weren't just using the Bible really based on their personal interpretation and then deciding, but rather looking at the world first and then deciding how to interpret the Bible.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I mean, it is, just fascinating, all these things that go on in the world. So I got to know about some of these investigations. Do you have like a favorite investigation that you were ever on, or maybe one that just kind of like a funny situation, like a comical investigation, not to make anyone like look bad, but rather just the situation was just kind of, fun in some way, somehow?
Yeah, there's been a couple. Probably one of my favorite investigations, and it's one that I'm probably best known for, but I spent 5 years on it, so I'll talk about it, is the Chupacabra.
Okay.
And of course, that's the vampire beast of fact and fiction. And I spent several years on that. I wrote a book called Tracking the Chupacabra, and I looked at the Chupacabra Vampire. It's probably the second or third best known creature after Bigfoot and Loch Ness Monster. But what intrigued me about the Chupacabra was that it's a vampire, right? Bigfoot's not a vampire, Mothman's not a vampire, Nessie's not a vampire, but the Chupacabra is said to be a vampire. It's said to suck the blood out of goats and chickens and things like that. And so I'm like, this is interesting, right? So you have allegedly this beast that's attacking livestock and goats and cattle and things, and presumably leaving blood-drained bodies all throughout Latin America, and yet nobody seems to photograph it. Nobody seems to be able to catch one.
Shocking, yes.
Yeah, shocking, right? Anyways, I'll spare you the whole detail, but that's one of my favorite stories, just because it's so interesting. I mean, there's aspects of it where there's conspiracy theory involved in it. There's UFO theology involved in it. There was even a Chupacabra that ended up in a creationist museum because.
Oh, okay, that's fitting, I guess.
Why not? So can you guess why it ended up there?
I mean, I've heard that they have. So this is the one in Kentucky.
There's a couple creations. It's run by a guy named John Adolphi.
Okay.
Anyway, the answer is that this shows that scientists were wrong.
Oh, okay.
So follow the logic here, right? So he bought this Chupacabra that's actually a coyote, and he puts it in his museum to prove to everybody that scientists can be wrong, because the scientists said the Chupacabra isn't real, and yet here it is.
Okay.
So by that same logic, the scientists say that the creation isn't real, but yet anyway. So anyway,
it's in the museum. So
it's in the museum. It's got a label on it. What more do you want? But actually, in the case of Chupacabra, it was interesting because I tracked down. I talked to the original eyewitness. I went to Puerto Rico and talked to her. And as it turns out, the very first version of Chupacabra was inspired by a 1995 science fiction film called Species.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, there's a whole really fascinating sci-fi connection. Anyway, I'll spare the details on that. But that's probably one of my favorite ones. I've done stuff on I did crop circles in Western New York. I made a huge crop circle in this farmer's field with his permission, of course.
Okay. You did just drive in there.
No, we didn't just drive there. Nazca lines, just all sorts of different stuff. there's just so many. It'd be hard to sort of pick an absolute favorite.
Do you have a funniest moment on these investigations?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I was investigating a haunted fort in Niagara on the Lake, Ontario, in Canada.
Okay.
And it's a beautiful little idyllic place. It's near a town called St. Catharines. And I was there for a TV shoot for a Toronto university that never went anywhere, but they
Okay.
shooted it. And so again, I'm the token skeptic. So everyone else is psychics and believers and ghost hunters, and I'm like, well, I'm the token skeptic. So they sort of put up with me, and I'm being very nice and diplomatic. We're all getting along, but they're they're clearly going about their business, assuming that there are ghosts all around them that are just waiting to be. And so, and I wrote about this in my book, Investigating Ghosts. And at one point it was an overnight vigil, because that's what they do, right? Because there's no particular reason why ghosts would appear in overnight vigils, but that's the hip thing to do.
Sure.
So anyway, it's not a great story, but anyway, at one point, we're all in this. It was in, I think it was just after Thanksgiving. This is in Ontario, so this is like north of Buffalo. So this is freezing cold. It's 2 a.m, and we're like, okay, fine. So it's me and I think 3 other ghost hunters, one of whom is a psychic, trying to speak to the ghost and saying, give us a sign. So we're all sitting there in the dark. We have 2 cameras on us in infrared. And again, I'm not there to cause any waves. I'm there just to observe and to sort of see what goes on. And so we're sitting there. And so the psychic says, if there are spirits here, give us a sign. And of course, nothing's going on. And then so she says, I know, this is an old fort, and there must be many spirits of the dead that are around here. Can you give us any sign? And right at that moment, a car alarm went off. Now, Niagara on the Lake, Fort George is right next to this small town, and you can hear car alarms and
right.
And so finally I was like, that's not a sign, that's a car alarm. And they were like, they were, I was being a little cheeky, but like, come on, guys. Like,
it's like, oh, something happened. I heard something.
Something happened, right? So,
it's connected. That's right.
Right. And there was another time when one of the ghost hunters farted. So we're sitting there, because shh, be really quiet. I'm like, dude, really? Like, oh, it's a ghost. Yeah, okay.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Okay. So have you ever had a situation where you felt like you were stumped about what's exactly happening, or have you ever always felt pretty comfortable, like, okay, this is what's going on here when it comes to any type of, paranormal investigation?
Yeah, that's a fair question. I get that now and then. Part of what in order to understand it, the answer is part of it is that the ability for me or anybody else to solve a mystery is dependent on how much evidence there is, right? And so it's like a homicide, right? If somebody finds a dead body in a city, the likelihood of that being solved is pretty high, because it was probably recently discovered, it's fresh, there may be many eyewitnesses, there may be evidence, there may be surveillance cameras, whatever else. If that same body is found in a rural area, in some farm somewhere, and it isn't found until 7 months after the person disappeared, the likelihood of solving that mystery drops a lot, because scavenging has been exposed to elements or whatever else. And it's the same thing with any mystery. So there are certainly mysteries that I can't solve, and often it's because I don't have enough evidence. Right. So if someone comes to me and says, and I've had this happen, like, oh yeah, dude, I saw you on TV, and I see you do these investigations. Help explain this, right? It's like, I was camping like 4 or 5 years ago. I was with my buddies out in the woods, and we're both there. It's like, it was getting on like midnight, and then we saw this glowing thing, and it rose up, and it was like red, and it zoomed off. What was that? I don't know.
Yeah.
I wasn't there.
Yeah.
I have no idea what that was. It could have been a UFO. It could have been somebody getting high. I don't know. And so it's one of those cases of where, you know, there's a positive correlation between how much evidence there is for anybody and how likely the mystery is to be solved. And for that reason, the cases that I investigate are by definition ones that there's good evidence for. So if I'm going to spend my time and my money, and in some cases, weeks, months,
sure,
investigating this, there has to be enough for me to investigate. So if somebody if it's just like, you know,
definitely,
I saw something weird or whatever else, then there's nothing I can do with that. And so that's part of the answer. And because of that, I tend to solve pretty much all the mysteries I investigate. Now, I don't like to admit that because it makes me sound like I'm being arrogant. But the fact is that it's a self-selecting group, right? Because I'm not going to tackle a mystery that there's nothing for me to investigate, right?
Yeah.
I need eyewitnesses. I need forensic evidence, photographs, videos, something to work from. And because I necessarily choose the ones that are going to be fruitful, that I'm most likely to succeed at, I do. That being said, there's certainly been a handful of times where, you know, the mystery isn't entirely solved for whatever reason.
Okay.
And so, and I've investigated hundreds of mysteries at this point on all sorts of different phenomena. And when I write them up in a book chapter, an article, whatever else, I say, this is the mystery. This is how I understand it. This is the research I did. These are the people I talked to. This is the archival research, whatever else. Here's my best explanation. And I say, this is what I think it is. Now, if someone wants to come back and say I'm wrong, great. What do you got?
Sure.
So I don't, you know, I rarely, if ever, say this is the hard and fast mystery. What I say is, this is my best explanation. This is what I brought to it, and this is what I can do. So that's what I'm trying to do.
I mean, yeah, that makes perfect sense. And obviously, it's, you know, it can be. I'm sure it's probably really frustrating how many people just like to talk about some personal experience they had that, you know, no one else had, and you know, no way that you could possibly, you know, give any feedback on because you weren't there. And that seems to be, you know, sort of a big obsession for people. Like, oh, you know, I swear it happened. I experienced it. It was right in front of me. And
that's fine. And that's one thing I have to often explain to people is say, look, you know, as I said before, I mean, for better or worse, usually worse, the evidence, the hard evidence just isn't there, right? If the hard evidence was there, we'd all agree on it. So instead, it's blurry photographs, it's some experience, it's somebody said that somebody said, and so on. And so part of the problem is that from psychology, we know that people are very invested in their personal experiences, right? Because they're like, it happened to me. It's like,
it's a personal connection there.
I mean, you know, you can't tell me I didn't see that. You can't tell me I didn't see a ghost. You can't tell me I didn't see a Bigfoot. And so my answer to that is, you're right. I can't tell you didn't see a Bigfoot. I don't know what you saw. However, I can tell you that there may be alternative explanations that are not wild and implausible about what you may have seen. You know, what are the circumstances? If possible, I try to do field research. I want to go there. I want to see what the circumstances are. And so this is why, you know, I tend to be fairly diplomatic with people and sincere. I said, look, you know, I don't know everything. I'm just trying to figure this out. Help me understand what you experienced. And at the end of the investigation, you may still believe, you may still be absolutely sure that you saw a psychic move something with his mind. You may be still sure that the psychic predicted whatever else. I can't help that. I'm not responsible for what people believe. All I can do is bring my best investigative acumen and research to it. And one thing that I see over and over and over again, this sort of gets back to your question, is that oftentimes mysteries remain unsolved because people don't want to put in the work.
Mhm.
And I've seen this over and over again. And I've told people, I said, look, I'm not the smartest guy in the room. I'm just the guy that put in the time and the effort. And so oftentimes you have people who are, they'll have this, there'll be some mystery, and people are impressed that I solved a mystery. I'm like, thank you for being impressed. What did you do? Right? It's like, like
That's right.
you're
just sitting here. That's like
yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so, and it's like, again, it's not, I'm not trying to be sarcastic. It's just, the point is that oftentimes oftentimes a mystery remains unsolved precisely because people haven't put in enough time and effort and critical thinking to it. It's not that they're categorically unexplainable. It's not that they're categorically unknowable. It's that I'm the person that put in the time and the effort to track down the eyewitnesses, to notice the discrepancies, to the archival research, and so on. I'll tell you one quick story. So I remember this happened a couple years back, where I got an email from a guy, and he's like, yeah, can you help me out with this? I'm trying to figure this out because there's this weird thumping sound in my house. And he's like, how do could this be a ghost? And so I wrote back to him. I said, okay, well, I'm super busy. I mean, I can't stop what I'm doing to help you solve your mystery, but I'll try and give you some guidance. Sometimes I'll say, read my book if it's a ghost case. But I'll say, so I emailed him back and said, okay, well, again, I don't know all your situation. Here's a couple pointers. So for example, try and figure out what are the circumstances under which this happens. And just check into that. And so I give him a couple pointers in terms of how to investigate. Because again, unfortunately, if you take your cues from TV, you're not going to learn how to investigate, because the Finding Bigfoot people, that's not investigation. The Ghost Adventure guys, that's not investigation. They're not showing you investigation. They're showing you some sort of TV light version investigation. And so the very next day, he emails me back and says, hey, I looked into it. I can't explain it. And I said, I wrote back, I'm like, in the course of one day, you decided
that was it. I tried.
Yeah, I tried. I'm like, you need to establish, you need to make an effort. You have to try and solve the mystery. I said, for example, figure out, is there a certain time of day that you're hearing this mysterious thumping? Is it coming from outside? Is it when a garbage truck comes by on certain days? Is it when the guy next door has his girlfriend over? I don't know what's going on, but is there some pattern to what's going on here? And you try and establish it from that. And he's like, whoa, okay, I'll look at it. But it was just, I'm like, come on, man. It's like, people, they want to solve the mysteries, but they don't want to put in time and the effort to do it.
Yeah, that is interesting, because it's like, if you're this curious that they're willing to contact you, it's like, why not just, figure it out? I mean, yeah, okay.
And I'll give you another quick example. There was a woman, and in fact, it's mentioned in my book, Big If True.
Boom, all right.
Buy now. Buy now. Yeah, link in the bottom. No, but it was a case of where a friend of mine had contacted me saying that her friend, who lived, I think, in Oklahoma or something, there was these mysterious marks that appeared on a wall.
Okay.
And she thought it was a ghost, and she said, I can't explain it. I heard about what you do. Can you give some pointers? And I asked a couple questions, and my best guess was that it was a teenager in the house. Oftentimes teenagers are known for causing ghostly activity. Make of that what you will. And so I said, my advice, since you asked me, is to put up cameras. And because she said it was ongoing, that there would be these mysterious just marks made on a wall. And she's like, it couldn't be anybody in the house because everybody's out of the house. I said, well, keep in mind that it could have been made and then you discovered it later. So just because you didn't find it until later doesn't mean it wasn't made until later. It just means you didn't find it until later. So I'm trying to put these things in there. And so I said, if you want my advice, here's what you do. You based on what you told me, it's most likely your young daughter, teenage daughter. I can't prove it. I'm not there. I don't have a dog in the fight, but that's my best guess based on what you showed me. And she showed me photographs of it. And I said, so here's what you do. You put up a couple hidden cameras. And if you really want to go about it a certain way, you show her where you're putting up cameras, but you put in other cameras you're not telling her about. Mm-hmm. And if my hypothesis is true, then any more writing on the wall will appear where she doesn't think the cameras are. And I thought it was to be fair, I thought it was a pretty good answer for her. And the reply I got back was, well, you know, hidden cameras are expensive. And I don't think, you know, I appreciate the thought, but we're not going to do it. I'm like, okay, that's fine. That's your choice. But think about this for a second. If you genuinely and sincerely believe that writing mysteriously appears on your walls and you can get video of that, you can be a millionaire. I promise you, if you have legitimate, unedited, actual video of writing appearing on a wall on camera, you're set for life. I promise you that's the case.
Right.
And that I see that over and over again, where people, they're interested enough to investigate, but not really interested enough to actually do it. So I'm like, do you want to solve the mystery or not?
I suppose another kind of aspect to going on these investigations is, you know, when you're going to all these random people's houses or different areas, and especially if you're the only one who might be skeptical of the situation, I'm sure it can be sometimes a little uncomfortable to just be in that atmosphere, and you're just, you know, you're not really in a place, you know, and you're just kind of, I mean, do you ever feel that way? That's a little weird, awkward or something?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, you know, sometimes people ask me if I get scared on investigations because, I mean, I investigate weird things. I mean, you know, ghosts and possessions and, I mean, monsters and things like that. And the answer is not really. I mean, the times when I've genuinely been most frightened, it's because of somebody else.
Right.
It's not some spooky growling thing in the dark. It's not some light, whatever else. It's because somebody next to me is freaking the hell out, and I don't know what they're going to do.
Right.
You know, I did an investigation a long time ago for a TV show called Mystery Quest. And we were in California doing a couple investigations, and you can find it online. It's called The Real Amityville Horror or something. It came out 8-10 years ago. But one of the other, so once again, I was the token skeptic on the investigation and on the show. But some of the other people there, they were like really hardcore believers. And so they were like hardcore Roman Catholics. So they would, you know, they had the holy water, they had the rosary. They're doing rituals to protect themselves from all the evil spirits that they were sure were there. And again, I'm being respectful. I'm not laughing at them. Like, all right, I mean, I'm there to observe. I'm there to understand what's going on and look at the dynamics of how they perceive ghost hunting and how they perceive what they're doing. But it was a little uncomfortable for me because it was clear to me that this particular group were sincere, and they were genuinely frightened for my safety. Because at least I think they were. I mean, that's what they said. I mean, they truly believed that there were evil spirits around them, and that I was in jeopardy of maybe being harmed by that. And so part of me was like appreciative of that. I'm like, you know, that's kind of sweet. But at the same time, it was kind of unsettling to me because I didn't share their worldview. In their worldview, there were evil spirits surrounding them that were just waiting for the opportunity to attack them, to seize them spiritually, to harm people. And I don't see the world that way. I'm not saying I'm right and they're wrong. That's not a worldview that I share. And in talking to them, and again, they were nice people. I'm not knocking them, but just talking to them, I realized they were coming from a very different worldview than I was, and I was sort of I was saddened in a way that they saw so much evil around them. If that's a good way to put it.
No, that's. I mean, I would think, though, obviously, like you, I don't understand what that would be like. But I imagine that would be almost torturous to live in a situation where you sincerely feel that your life is basically being threatened by some supernatural entity. I mean, that sounds like a nightmare. So,
yeah, and keep in mind, this actually folds back in perfectly to the topic, right? We're talking about curses, we're talking about superstitions, we're talking about beliefs. And anytime that you have a curse, typically you have a counter curse, right? And so if you see a black cat crossing your path, how do you avoid it? You go around it. If you accidentally spill salt, how do you avoid the curse? You throw salt behind your shoulder. So for many of these curses, there is a counter curse. There's a countermeasure to that, and it's the same thing with these ghost hunters, right? So their way of protecting themselves, whether it was real or imagined, was to do these rituals, to make sure they were anointed, to make sure they were wearing their prayer beads, to make sure they had holy water on them. And so to them, it all made sense. It was all this sort of self-reinforcing worldview. So to them, I can only imagine that they left that investigation feeling good about this. Like, well, we investigated, we didn't get possessed because, of course, we performed the rituals right? We took precautions.
Yeah.
And we're like saying, well, I wear a pendant to ward off elephant attacks. Haven't been attacked by an elephant, so it must work.
That's right. All these little things. Yeah, that's right. Oh my gosh. So what would you say is your favorite superstitious belief?
Favorite superstitious belief? That's a good one. There's so many fascinating ones. I think the concern over the number 13 is especially interesting.
Yeah.
When I go to hotels and airlines, I often check to see whether there's a 13th floor or 13th row.
That's interesting. Yeah.
And sometimes I'll make a comment to somebody nearby. Of course, the steward or stewardess, they didn't design the plane. That's not their fault,
Right.
But it'd be like,
course.
it's like, I'll say, there really is a 13th row here, just because you label it 14, it's still 13 rows. That doesn't change anything. You could call it whatever the hell you want, right? And so again, I'm not trying to get in anybody's face. I just try a little lighthearted skepticism. It's like, well, hold on here, so there's lots of those. It's interesting when you're talking about the psychological aspect of curses and superstitions, in that at times it can be protective. And you see this, for example, with athletes, where I like tennis. I used to follow a lot of tennis. You would see some of the greats, Boris Becker, and I mean, I'm dating myself, but back see some of the greats. They would have these. I think even Rafa Nadal does that. He has these. You don't step on lines. You wear a certain color shirt, that sort of thing. And it's interesting because oftentimes it helps players improve their performance, and it's not because there's necessarily any cosmic intelligence that cares whether they wore a yellow shirt that day or whether they step on line. It's because they have psychological reinforcement, because it's one less thing they have to deal with. So there's that side, and there's also, I want to talk just quickly about the darker side of this. And
definitely.
In that, for example, I've written about this and talked about this on my podcast, Squaring the Strange, where there's a darker side to the belief in superstitions, particularly in places like India and Africa, where there's belief that there are witches, and the witches are causing harm in communities. And a lot of times when I talk about this, people sort of think of witches as being, the 1700s in Germany, or 69s in Salem or wherever else. But the fact is that today, as we speak, there are many people in the world that genuinely and sincerely believe in witchcraft, and that's okay, except insofar as that there are people who are blamed for being witches, and in some cases there are people who are being attacked. There are people who've been killed. A friend of mine, Leo Igwe, who's an activist in Nigeria, he's done wonderful work on fighting witchcraft superstition. And he's investigated cases in Nigeria and also in East Africa, where people, oftentimes women, will be accused of being witches, and sometimes they'll be killed, they'll be tortured, they'll be burned to death. And so because the community at large believes that that some bad thing happening to them, a disease, a stillbirth, a virus, whatever else, is attributable to these harmless women. And so anyway, I try to make that point because the belief in harm and the belief in witchcraft and superstition and curses can have very real consequences, and it's important not to sort of gloss that over.
Well, I mean, yeah, definitely, and that's something I think everyone listening really needs to be aware of. It's just, this is people think about Salem witch trials, for example, as a historical footnote, something that happened. These things are still going on in different places around the world.
Absolutely.
And if we loosen the definition of superstition more, you could include like alternative medicine and people with quack, cancer cures, or the anti-vax movement. So these are things that are very much dangerous, believing in things without evidence, and neglect, whether you're hurting people or neglecting your own body. I mean, that's just, you're playing with fire. It's scary that people don't recognize that enough.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. There's a continuum, right? If people want to believe in Bigfoot, for the most part, it doesn't matter. Believe they're out there. It's not a probably wrong belief that will likely harm you. If, however, you believe that COVID vaccines aren't safe, that can kill you. That can literally kill you.
Yeah.
If, however, you believe any number of things, you believe alternative medicine or psychic surgery or homeopathy or whatever else, and you choose an unproven medicine or technique over a proven one, that can have real consequences. And so anyway, it's important to point that out, because too often people sort of view superstition as being this sort of minor, benign, antiquated thing. And sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't.
I mean, definitely. Now, going back real quick, because when you talked about sports, I'm a fairly big sports fan, and I know you're talking about tennis and superstitions. One thing that I've noticed, and probably one of the other most superstitious sports from what I've seen, is baseball. And how many players have all these rituals, where they're touching themselves in 10 different ways before they go up to bat, or have some specific motion. And you
got the Cubs curse.
That's right. And there's so many curses historically in baseball. Probably my favorite thing, though, is when you see a player hit a home run and they come back, or like when they reach home plate, or right after they've hit a home run while running the bases, they'll point up at the sky, because God's biggest priority right now is whether you've hit a home run or not. God's a sports fan,
right? He's waiting the big thumbs up, right?
Yeah, he's got some big money on a game or something, So, it's just funny.
Yeah, sometimes I'll watch UFC, and it's funny to see both the MMA fighters who both full of cross tattoos, thanking God for their victory. I'm like, he was not one of your sides. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, what does the Bible say about beating someone up for fun, and money? I wonder if that might be a contradiction of some principles there. I'm not sure, but that's interesting. So I guess getting close to wrapping this up, one big question for you I have is, looking back on your career, what have your investigations and your research taught you about people and about life?
Well, pretty broad question. No, it's a fair question. I think that my investigations have taught me how easy it is that we can be fooled, and how ingrained it is for us to see the foils and frailties in other people, but be blind to our own. Part of my worldview as a skeptic, and again, having somebody who has a background in psychology, is recognizing just how fallible we all are. How we can misperceive things, we can misremember things, we can misunderstand things. And I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about me. I'm talking about literally everybody. And so there's a certain humility that I think that skepticism brings to my worldview, certainly, in just recognizing that I could be wrong, and nobody has these divine powers and this certitude. And I think that oftentimes that's what's missing in a lot of public discourse, is the recognition that we could be wrong. Maybe we misunderstood something. And there's always this tendency to, point blame at other people, and if there's a misunderstanding, to attribute malice to them. And I try to approach people and life in general with a principle of charity, and say, there's, there are lots of ways that people can misunderstand things, misperceive things. It doesn't mean they're stupid, doesn't mean they're crazy, doesn't mean they're insane. It just means that they may have misunderstood something, and people get defensive with it when I tell them that, because they're like, well, I know what I saw. I'm like, I'm not challenging you personally. This is not an attack on your identity. I have this conversation with psychics, and I have friends of mine who believe they're psychic, and I say, look, I'm skeptical of psychic abilities. This is not a personal attack on you. I'm not trying to hurt your feelings. I'm trying to quantify empirically whether you can do this or whether other people can do this. So this is not a personal matter for me. I'm not trying to hurt your feelings. I'm not trying to bring you down a peg. I'm not trying to debunk you in front of the world. I'm trying to understand if there's a phenomena going on, and if so, what's the mechanism, things like that. So I think that's probably one of the main lessons that I bring to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely the right approach if you ever want to make progress with bridging the gap between people of different mentalities on what they believe, and I think that's also really cool, because it shows there's a humbleness there in this skeptic community or scientists. There's definitely, I think some people get the impression that there's lots of people that just want to make fun of people that believe in things. And what you do is showing that there's a lot more to this, a lot more thought to it, and it's really just about finding what's most likely to be true and trying to help people.
That's what I try to do, and I appreciate you pointing that out. I mean, look, skepticism is a big tent. I mean, we have Penn and Teller, we have the South Park guys, we have the late James Randi, a colleague of mine. There's lots of people involved in it. And my approach is investigative skepticism. And again, my goal is to solve a mystery. Whatever the answer is, if the answer is that there really is ghosts and psychic powers, great, let's figure this out. But if there's not, then we also need to figure that out. And part of that is recognizing that there's lots of ways that people can misunderstand and misperceive things. There's hoaxes, there's misunderstanding, there's I've solved mysteries where the mystery was created because somebody copied something wrong. And you've seen the same thing as the story. And so it takes little or nothing to create a mystery. Creating a mystery is very, very easy to do. All you have to do is to obscure a few parts of the context. But solving a mystery, that, to my mind, is what's valuable. Solving mysteries and understanding more things about the world, whether it's how buildings stand up, or how biology works, or what makes a virus vaccine work with rats. Solving mysteries, that's the hard part, and that's what I try to do, and to get other people to do.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, that's fantastic. I'm really glad that there's people like you doing it. I know when I first came across Skeptical Inquirer and your work, I was definitely someone who's curious, like, okay, all these people believe in these things, what's the scientific perspective on this? And it was refreshing to see that there are people out there trying to help and make sense of it beyond just some blind faith in something. And that's really important, I think, for a lot of people growing up and trying to figure out, their lives and what to make of it. So what's the best way for people to keep track of your work and follow you if they want to, really dive into your books and articles and stay up to date?
Sure. Well, I got my first vaccine 2 weeks ago, so Bill Gates is tracking me right now, as we all know.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Not joking, making that. No,
that's right.
No, yeah, so people can find me, as I mentioned, I have a podcast called Squaring the Strange. It comes out about every 2 weeks. I have a couple of co-hosts, Celestia Ward and Pascal Romero. You can find it on iTunes and elsewhere. I have, I think, 12 or 13 books that you can find on Amazon. And I always encourage people to go to their local independent bookstores. Not everybody can do that, but if try and buy local if you can. I'm on Twitter at BT Radford. I'm on Facebook. Usually there's a caricature of this face right here, so look for that. I also am I'm the editor and also I'm the deputy editor and also columnist for Skeptical Inquirer Science Magazine, and I have occasional articles and columns there. So I'm around and about.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me and for everyone listening. And I hope to learn more about what's going on with your work in the future and look forward to learning more about these investigations and what's new going on around the world and what people believe. So thank you again.
Thanks for having me on. It's been great talking to you, and let's do it again sometime.
Absolutely.